Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting the Cleric Beast from Bloodborne by CMON Games. Hey everyone, Matt here from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to the 6th episode in this Bloodborne painting series, and today we are painting the Cleric Beast. This is one of the enemies that you'll face in this adventure and exploration game from CMON Games. So after I finished painting the last mini in this series, which was Father Gascoigne, I then went back to the box to try and work out which mini I was going to be painting next. And as soon as I saw the Cleric Beast, I knew that this was going to be the one. And not just because of how big and imposing it looks, because, I mean, that was absolutely part of it, but it was more to do with how textured the Cleric Beast is because of all of the fur all over its body. And so I knew that I was going to be able to paint the Cleric Beast in a way that I tried to paint part of Father Gascoigne that just did not pan out. And that is essentially doing a zenithal undercoat and then using washes over the top of that to base coat it. So I tried doing this with Father Gascoigne's cloak because the first time that I painted it, I just built up the highlights and the shadows just by layering like normal. But I was then thinking after that about this technique because I know how well this technique works at giving a really grim, dark and gritty kind of finish, and that would suit his cloak really, really well. But as you can see here, it just did not pan out at all. And the reason that I think it just didn't work is because his cloak is just too smooth. So yeah, there are folds, but anywhere that there aren't folds in the material, it's just flat surfaces, so there was nowhere really for the wash to go. Whereas with a mini like the Cleric Beast here being highly textured, the wash has lots and lots and lots of recesses to flow into. So here you can see some pictures of other minis from Bloodborne that I've painted using this technique, just laying down that zenithal undercoat and then washes over the top, and I just think this works really, really well, but you can see with all of them they've got fur and things like that, so highly textured surfaces, so lots of places for the washes to flow into. And so because the last time that I tried this with Father Gascoigne, it just didn't pan out, I wanted to redeem it a little bit and follow it up with a mini that I knew it was going to work with. And so that's why I've picked the Cleric Beast next. One, because it's an absolutely awesome mini that's going to look really, really cool, but I do get to do this wash technique over a zenithal undercoat, which is going to make this guy look absolutely awesome. So to start off with, I laid down a black prime, which will end up being all of the shadows, and then I dry brushed with grey in a top-down motion. And doing that just makes sure that the grey paint collects all the upper-facing parts of all of the lumps and bumps, but leaves the underside still in black, so that there will still be shadow. And as you can see, I did cover a fair bit of the mini with the grey, like up on its stomach, down the sides of its legs, those sorts of areas, just to make sure that there was going to be enough grey showing after I did the white dry brush, which you can see that I've just finished there. And so that white dry brush that I did, still with a top-down motion, but this was really more just focused on the upper-facing parts of each section of the Cleric Beast. So the top of its head, the top of its arms, the top of its legs, just those surfaces that are going to get the most amount of light. And the idea of this zenithal undercoat is so that once the washes start going over the top, which you can see I'm doing all of the skin at the moment, with the washes being so thin, it's going to allow all of those different tones to still come through rather than just covering them up, which is what more would happen if I was painting with acrylics. And so it's going to change all of the different surfaces to the colors that I want it to, so the skin now has this blue tinge, but anywhere that this blue-black wash mixture is going over white, it appears much, much lighter than anywhere it goes over, say, the black, where it's going to appear much, much darker and look as though it's in shadow. And so, effectively, we get completely free highlighting and shading. And this is where it becomes so effective for a mini like this, which is so textured, because if you were going to highlight up all of this fur, you'd either be doing a dry brush, which can very easily get down in between the raised parts and fill in where it should actually be shadows, or you would be individually picking out each of those furs, and that would just take all day. And so this is a super fast way to do your highlighting and shading on a really textured mini. But also, as you can see, because the washes are so dark, it's allowing those tones to come through, but it gives this really cool, dark, grim, and gritty look, because it is still keeping it so dark. And so the actual finish that you get from this, I think, just looks awesome. And for a horror themed game like this, or something like Mansions of Madness, any minis where you have a highly textured finish, it just suits them so well. And as you can see here, I've also used it on zombies from Zombicide, because again, it gives that really gritty and dirty look. And even though the minis from Zombicide, they aren't highly textured, they don't have fur or hair or something like that, because those minis are quite small, all of the muscle definition still allows the washes plenty of places to flow into. So that's definitely where this wash technique doesn't work if you have a mini that is really smooth and doesn't have lots of recesses for the wash to flow into, because unless you can get a really consistent thickness, it's just going to dry in a blotchy way and it just doesn't look good. But that's not a problem at all with a mini like this that has lots and lots of recesses for the wash to flow into, so hair and fur surfaces like that are perfect for it, because it doesn't really matter about whether you have a consistent thickness, because there are only such a small amount of smooth flat surfaces for the wash to settle on that if it isn't totally consistent with its thickness, you just can't tell, because most of it's flowing into the recesses. So there we go, the base coating for the Cleric Beast is effectively done. Next I do put a sepia wash just over those horns, just because I wasn't totally happy with the tone of them. But really quickly I've gotten him to this point, and I think he's looking absolutely awesome. You can see that gradient that's created by allowing the tones of the zenithal undercoat to come through. So the top of his head, arms, legs, those sorts of areas are appearing lighter than where the wash has gone down over the black, which is in a really dark shadow. And so you get that cool highlighting and shading done effectively for free, because I completely skipped that step. And that grim, dark, and dirty kind of look that you get from the washes, I think just suits a mini like this, a horror theme, just so well. So that's the main part of this video covered. From here, it's painting the teeth and claws and eyes and those sorts of smaller areas, doing some blood at the end. So I'm going to mostly leave you now to watch me paint the rest of the Cleric Beast, but I'll come in and out as the video is going along when it's up to a point that I think it's worth jumping in and further explaining what you're watching. So I really hope you enjoy watching the rest of how I paint the Cleric Beast, because I absolutely loved painting this guy. He was lots and lots of fun to paint, and in the end I was really happy with how he comes up. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. So here I just wanted to add a little bit of depth back into these exposed ribs because I put that sepia wash over them after initially base coating them just to dirty and age them up a little bit, but then I felt they just kind of looked a little bit flat, and so I've just gone back to the bone color that I base coated them with, and then I'm just picking out a point on each rib just to put down some of that paint, and then cleaning off the bristles and then feathering out the edges so that it blends back into that sepia tone. I'm not really trying to actually highlight the ribs here, I'm more just trying to add to the aged look of them because not all parts of all of the surfaces of the ribs should be looking exactly the same. Some parts will have aged more than others. And so that's just what I'm trying to kind of replicate here a bit. So there'll be some parts that are still more bony looking than others that haven't rotted away quite as much, but then other parts will be a bit more deteriorated, a bit dirtier. And yeah, that's just the look that I'm going for here. And this actually ended up adding quite a bit more to these ribs than what I initially thought it would. I think purely just by adding to the depth of color, just added quite a bit there, and I was really happy with how they ended up looking. But when I was painting them, I knew that I'd be coming back later and putting quite a bit of blood sort of all over them, so it didn't need to be perfect, but it did just add a little bit to it. And just here, just while I'm in talking at the moment, I just felt that I lost a little bit too much of the tones from the undercoat with all of the layers of the wash that went onto these horns sort of parts of the Cleric Beast. So I'm just quickly going back, just doing a little bit of a dry brush, just with a lighter version of the tone that this horn part ended up being, and then I just popped the wash back over the top, and that just added to the contrast and brought back out the texture that I thought had been lost a bit when all of those layers of the wash went on. But you can see here that I have mixed in some Lamia medium just so that it's not too thick, because I just want it to tint it slightly so that those tones from the dry brush that I did then can still come through. So you would have noticed earlier in the video when I first started painting these claws that I was doing striations, or just lines that run from one end of the claw to the other. That was to create a ridged or textured kind of look. And to try and make the tip of each claw look as though it is lighter than the base, I did a couple of layers of those striations, gradually getting lighter and lighter and painting just closer to the tip. But now that I've come back after the wash went down, just to dull those striations down a little bit, I'm now really focusing on just building up how bright the tip of each claw is, but I'm not doing this by painting striations anymore. I'm now just putting essentially just a blob of this lighter bone color down right on the tip, and then just feathering the edge out, so that the tip of each claw is going to be quite bright, and then it will gradually feather into those ridges just so that there's a nice smooth blend. And I've shifted from just painting gradually lighter and lighter and lighter striations until I'm just painting the very tip to more of this feathering technique, just because I find it a lot easier to build up to that really bright contrast right on the end of the tip through layering rather than striations, just because this is what works easiest for me. For you, it may be easier just to keep on painting those lines, but I just keep building up to a lighter and lighter color until I'm doing white right on the very tip, just to create a real depth of color to build a really good bit of contrast in each of these claws. Just a quick note here, I'm painting a glowing eye here in the exact same way that I've done it lots and lots of times, just starting with a dark red and then gradually building up to white, just to make basically the iris look as though it's glowing. The mistake that I made here, I don't really know why I did this because I haven't made this mistake in the past, but I didn't start with a dark enough red, so I don't think I got enough contrast between the darkest red and then the white to really sell that glowing look. But yeah, I just started with a lighter red than what I normally do. I don't know why, but I didn't notice it until after I was done, so I didn't go back and fix it up. But yeah, learn from my mistake. If you're going to be doing a glowing eye or something like that, start with a nice dark color. So with the base here, what I wanted to try and do was create the effect that this stone platform that the Cleric Beast is on has some environmental weathering done to it. So I started with some black and I was then going to wet blend in some brown and some green, but I didn't really like the look of just the black, so I concentrated more on the brown, and then once I'd covered the whole thing in brown, I then covered it with the green, and these two colors mixing together just worked really, really well, just to create that subtle effect that I was going for. I didn't want it to look too over the top, but just to sell it a little bit that this stone platform has been sitting out in the environment for a while, and it's not just that nice clean stone that it used to be. And then to add to this, I then glued down some different tufts of grass as though it's growing up through the stone, as well as gluing down some green tea leaves here and there, as though they are leaves that have sort of blown through. But yeah, I moved away from that initial black that I was putting down just because I didn't think having black, brown, and grey areas just blended together was really going to work. I needed to build up that browny green sort of colour that you can see there. and I have saved until last one of my most favourite things to do, and that is to build up really, really cool blood effects. So one of the most common mistakes, I suppose you would say, that I see people making with blood effects is that they just get thick blobs of whatever paint product it is that they're using and then just dab it aimlessly sort of around the mini, and what you end up with then is either just really thick spots of blood or absolutely none at all. And this just isn't how blood actually behaves, especially if a mini has been in a battle and they've got a sword and they've cut through someone, or in this case they've got claws and they've ripped a body apart. Because first of all, blood soaks into whatever surface it's on, whether it's soaking into fur or into material, plus it also splatters around. So when I'm doing blood, what I'll do is put down a good thick blob where I want it to be at its thickest, but then I'll clean off the bristles and then feather out the edge so that it looks as though it is either soaking into the material that it's on or that it's splattered, and as it gets further away from the point of kind of impact, I suppose, it's just not as thick anymore. And then I'll get another good bit of the blood for the blood god and put it back in that spot where I want it to be its thickest, so that way it looks as though there is either a point where there's a wound, or like with the claws here, the tips of the claws will look like there's really, really thick blood on there, which is where the Cleric Beast has clawed someone apart, but then it's splattered up onto its arm or just soaked up through the fur, just to more replicate the way the blood actually looks. Now this takes quite a bit longer to do than just dabbing it around here and there, but I think the time that goes into doing this is absolutely worth it, because it just makes it look so much more realistic, and then you feel the impact of it so much more because it looks so much more gory, and you can really imagine that this Cleric Beast has gotten hold of a hunter, torn it apart, or maybe even with its teeth ripped part of the hunter out. And then also with its ribs that are exposed, there's lots of blood at the point of its body where the ribs would be coming out, so blood would be seeping out there, but not so much out on the ends of them, where the blood's probably not really going to be reaching. But yeah, I love painting blood because I think the effects that you can get are just really, really cool, and it just adds so much to the overall look of a mini. So with just the black rim to be painted around the edge of the base, our Cleric Beast is finished. So thank you very, very much for checking out another one of my videos. As always, I really, really hope you enjoyed it and that you found something in this video that you can take away and use in your own painting. If you did enjoy it, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with future videos as they keep coming out, as well as stopping by the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts for this channel, where you can see what I'm painting at the moment, and so what videos are going to be coming out in the near future. But that's going to do us for today, so until next time, this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.